The clink of Sharon's wine glass shattered as Emily Olson stepped onto the terrace, her voice cutting through the afternoon like a knife. Dave Carlson cheated? No, he didn't. The words hung, heavy and solid, stripping Sharon bare in front of Linda, Carol, and Sarah. Emily's gaze, cool as lake ice, settled on her. He'll be mine now. The afternoon sun, usually a warm comfort, felt sharp on Sharon Miller's shoulders as she settled deeper into the wrought iron chair on the Travelers' Inn terrace. She took a slow sip of Pinot Grigio, the chilled wine doing little to smooth the edges of her carefully rehearsed narrative. Beside her, Linda and Carol nodded with practiced sympathy, while Sarah, new to their Sunday ritual, watched with a quiet intensity that Sharon found unsettling. So, he just admitted it? Linda asked, her voice laced with the appropriate level of shock. Sharon set her glass down, a small, controlled clink against the glass-topped table. Admitted it? No. Caught him, yes. She let a small, bitter laugh escape. He had his little dalliance, his little fling. Like I wouldn't notice. After all these years, you think I don't know the signs? She paused, letting the silence hang, letting them imagine the betrayal. So I kicked him out. Simple as that. The house is mine, the cars are mine. He can go crawl back into whatever hole he came from. Her voice was steady, but beneath it, a current of venom ran cold. Dave Carlson, her husband of 15 years, was now a convenient villain in her story. He was a man who had cheated, a man she had righteously banished. Carol reached across the table, patting Sharon's hand. You're better off without him, honey. You're still young, you need a reliable man. Sharon offered a thin smile, accepting the offered consolation. She felt Sarah's gaze still on her, a persistent weight. The new woman, younger, hadn't quite grasped the social niceties of their group. Sarah cleared her throat softly. It just sounds like there's a lot of pain there still. Sharon stiffened, a flicker of irritation crossing her face before she smoothed it away. Pain? No, not pain. Disappointment, perhaps, but mostly relief. It was then that a shadow fell over their table, not from the low-hanging sun, but from a figure standing directly behind Carol. A woman, tall and composed, her presence unexpected. Emily Olson. Sharon hadn't seen her in years, not since high school. Emily's voice, clear and unhurried, cut through the afternoon hum. Dave Carlson cheated? No, he didn't. The air on the terrace seemed to thicken. Linda and Carol froze, their wine glasses halfway to their lips. Sharon felt the color drain from her face, a cold wash spreading from her temples down her neck. She turned slowly, her smile dissolving into a brittle line. Emily stepped forward, her gaze meeting Sharon's directly. There was no aggression in her posture, just an unyielding certainty. I think I would remember if I'd had an affair with Dave 2 years ago, wouldn't you? Her eyes held Sharon's, unwavering. Because 2 years ago, I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, studying linguistics. It's hard to cheat on someone from a different continent, Sharon. Sharon's mouth went dry. 2 years ago, that was the timeline she had spun for Linda and Carol, the specific window she'd invented for Dave's fabricated transgressions. Her carefully constructed narrative, meant to elicit sympathy and admiration for her strength, was unraveling, thread by thread, in front of her. She could feel the stares of her friends, their expressions shifting from concern to confusion, then to a dawning comprehension. You don't know what you're talking about, Sharon stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. She gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. Emily's expression softened, a hint of genuine sadness flickering in her eyes. Don't I? Or perhaps I know too much. About how you always wanted Dave, how you manipulated him, even back then, to end things with his first girlfriend, just so you could swoop in. You've always been good at making situations appear exactly as you needed them to be, Sharon. Sharon? A hot flush rose on Sharon's neck. The casual public unveiling of her oldest, most guarded secret made her breath catch. This wasn't just about Dave's alleged infidelity. This was about her entire history with him, laid bare. Don't you dare, Sharon hissed, her voice barely audible, thick with raw fury. You say another word, Emily, and I will make your life a living hell. Emily simply looked at her, a quiet assessment in her eyes. Life hasn't been kind to you, has it? It wasn't a question, but a statement, delivered without malice, yet carrying the full weight of judgment. She then shifted her gaze, taking in Linda, Carol, and Sarah for a moment, before returning to Sharon. I'm going to visit Arthur Peterson first thing tomorrow. I think it's time Dave Carlson's name was cleared, and I think it's time he heard the truth, the real truth. She turned, her movement fluid and purposeful. As she walked away from their table, her back straight, she paused just beyond the terrace railing, not looking back. Her voice carried clearly, cool and devastating. Thank you for throwing him out. He'll be mine. Sharon sat there frozen, the words echoing in the sudden silence. Emily's departing declaration was a final, brutal blow, leaving her exposed, cornered, and utterly broken. The image of Dave at the high school swim meet, soaking wet, his first girlfriend cheering him on, flashed in Sharon's mind. She remembered the precise calculations she had made that day, the small, seemingly innocent steps she had taken to make him hers. It had all started there. The sensible sedan hummed quietly beneath Emily Olsen's hands as she navigated the familiar streets. The Traveler's Inn was already receding in her rearview mirror. Sharon Miller's stunned face replaced by the focused determination that now settled deep within Emily. Her destination, the Peterson residence, rose from behind a canopy of old oaks, a grand brick home that held decades of Dave Carlson's family history. It was a place she knew, a place that felt both distant and intimately connected to the path she was now carving. Arthur Peterson answered the door himself. His frame was still unbent by time, though his hair had thinned to a wispy white. His eyes, a piercing blue, held the sharpness of a man who had seen ocean judges quietly. Emily Olsen, he stated, his voice a low rumble, a faint smile playing on his lips. It's been a long time, girl. What brings you to this old man's door on a Sunday afternoon? Emily stepped inside, the coolness of the foyer a welcome contrast to the warmth outside. Arthur, she began, meeting his direct gaze. I'm here about Dave, about Sharon's claims. She's been telling everyone he cheated. It's not true, and I intend to prove it. Arthur led her to his study, a room steeped in the scent of worn leather and old books. He settled into a deep armchair, gesturing for her to take the one opposite. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer immediate judgment. Instead, he simply watched her, his keen eyes scanning her face, absorbing her words, weighing their truth. He'd always been a man of careful observation, a quality Emily respected. Emily knew she couldn't present anything less than her full intention to Arthur. He valued honesty above all else. Arthur, she said, her voice even, without a trace of hesitation. I'm going to be the next Mrs. Carlson. It was a simple statement, delivered as if discussing the weather, yet it held the weight of years of silent resolve. She saw a flicker in his eyes, not surprise so much as a slow dawning of understanding, and perhaps a hint of approval. Arthur leaned forward slightly, a mischievous glint entering his eyes, like sun catching on river water. Well, that's a bold claim, Emily, but you always were a determined young woman. Dave, he's been keeping himself busy. Heard he's doing some research work at St. Christopher's Crossing University these days. Big campus, lots of departments. He paused, letting the information settle, knowing she would pick up on the subtle direction. A small, knowing smile touched Emily's lips. Funny you should mention St. Christopher's, Arthur. I accepted a teaching position there. Linguistics department. Starts next month. The quiet revelation hung in the air, a testament to her meticulous planning, her unwavering focus. Arthur's smile widened slightly. He understood the careful preparation behind her seemingly sudden arrival. Just then the study door burst open. Susan Carlson, Dave's mother, stood there, her face flushed with agitation, her eyes wide with a frantic energy. Arthur, who is this? What is she doing here? Dave's marriage is in ruins, and you're entertaining guests? Her gaze landed on Emily, narrowing with suspicion. You're Emily Olsen, aren't you? Always causing trouble. Is this your doing? Are you trying to ruin my son's life even further? Susan. Arthur's voice, though quiet, resonated with an unmistakable authority that instantly silenced his daughter-in-law. Calm yourself. You will listen. Emily has information that concerns Dave, and it contradicts everything Sharon has been saying. He motioned for Susan to sit, his gaze unwavering, until she grudgingly complied, though she still glared at Emily. Sharon told everyone Dave cheated on her 2 years ago, Emily stated, her voice steady despite Susan's visible hostility. She opened her laptop, navigating to a folder she had prepared. 2 years ago, I was not here. I was here. She turned the screen towards them, displaying crisp images of passport stamps, university enrollment papers from the University of Edinburgh, and a series of digital photos of Scotland's ancient streets and rugged landscapes. Studying abroad, you can't cheat on someone when you're continents apart, not when you're both still in the same town. Susan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Arthur leaned closer, his expression grim as he examined the evidence. The casual cruelty of Sharon's lie, designed to destroy Dave's reputation and secure her own narrative, was now undeniably exposed. She lied, Susan whispered, her voice tinged with a dawning horror. All this time? About Dave? It's not the first time she's done something like this, Emily continued, closing her laptop. Years ago, when Dave was with his first girlfriend, Lisa, Sharon orchestrated a situation. Made it look like Dave was seeing someone else, spread rumors. She wanted him, and she got him. The details were vague, but the implication was clear. A carefully executed pattern of manipulation, a history of sowing discord for her own gain. Susan stared at Emily, a mix of shock and profound understanding settling over her face. Her initial anger was replaced by a deep sense of injustice and sorrow. Emily, I had no idea. We all believed her. Please, stay for dinner. Robert, Dave's father, will be home soon. He needs to hear this. We need to talk more. Emily offered a polite but firm smile. I appreciate the offer, Susan, but I have to leave tonight for my new place near St. Christopher's. I start getting settled tomorrow. She stood gathering her laptop. But I will find Dave, and when I do, I will tell him everything you'd want him to know. That you never believe Sharon's lies, that you love him, and that his family is waiting for him. As Emily made her way to the door, a determined glint in her eyes, she noticed Frank Carlson, Dave's younger brother, standing in the hallway. He leaned against the wall, a silent observer in the shadows, his expression unreadable. He had heard. Emily offered him a brief, almost imperceptible nod before stepping out into the late afternoon light, a quiet resolution solidifying within her. The path ahead was clear. Frank Carlson watched Emily Olsen's sedan disappear down the tree-lined driveway, his lean frame still propped against the hallway wall. He turned to Arthur Peterson, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, Grandpa, she's still got it, hasn't she? Some women just know how to use what they've got. Arthur's gaze remained placid, revealing nothing. Emily is a smart woman, Frank, always has been. Smart, yeah, Frank scoffed, pushing off the wall. And ambitious. So what was all that about Dave? She trying to worm her way back into his life now that Sharon's kicked him out? Seems a bit too convenient. Frank's voice held a casual dismissiveness, as if Dave's life was merely a chess piece to be moved. She has her reasons, Arthur said, his eyes now distant, focused on something beyond Frank's immediate understanding. He offered no further details, no fuel for Frank's cynical curiosity. Frank shrugged, walking towards the kitchen. Whatever. Dave's always been a pushover anyway. Probably better if he just stays out of the way. Less trouble for everyone. He didn't articulate the rest of his thought, the unspoken part where everyone meant him, and out of the way meant it allowing him to pursue his own interests, whatever they might be, without the complication of Dave's presence. Dave, in Frank's estimation, was simply not worth the trouble. Meanwhile, a few miles away in her meticulously kept home, Sharon Miller sat on her sofa, the remnants of her composure crumbling. The porcelain figurine on the mantelpiece seemed to mock her with its serene, unblemished perfection. Emily Olsen's words on the terrace had been a physical blow, not just to her reputation, but to the very foundation of her self-created reality. She closed her eyes, a wave of familiar memories washing over her. Dave, she remembered the precise moment she had first seen him, 18 years old, emerging from the pool at the high school swim meet. The water clinging to his broad shoulders, his dark hair slicked back, the quiet intensity in his eyes. He was modest, almost painfully shy, a stark contrast to the boisterous boys she usually attracted. That day, she had looked at him, and a clear, unwavering thought had solidified in her mind. I want him. He was with Lisa back then, a sweet, unassuming girl who cheered with genuine enthusiasm from the stands. Sharon remembered the subtle glances she'd thrown his way, the accidental bumps in the hallway, the carefully crafted conversations that seemed purely coincidental. She worked at him, patiently chipping away at his reserved nature, planting seeds of doubt about Lisa, making herself seem like the more sophisticated, more understanding choice. It had taken time, but eventually Lisa was gone and Sharon was there, stepping into the void. Their marriage followed, a logical progression from those early, calculated moves. She remembered the feeling of triumph, the quiet satisfaction of having secured what she wanted, and then the sudden pregnancy. She remembered the doctor's mild confusion when the dates didn't quite align with her story, a confusion she had deftly brushed aside with tears and exaggerated morning sickness. It had been the final, irrevocable tether, binding Dave to her, making their union an undeniable fact. Now all of it felt like it was disintegrating. Back at the Peterson residence, Susan Carlson paced Arthur's study, her face streaked with tears. "I can't believe it, Arthur. All this time, we pushed Dave away. We believed Sharon and she lied. She lied about everything." She picked up the phone, her hands trembling as she dialed her husband's number. "Robert, you need to come home. Now." Emily was just here. She had proof, real proof. Dave didn't cheat. Sharon made it all up. "Robert," she lied. Robert Carlson's voice was initially guarded, a blend of skepticism and exhaustion. He had heard too many accusations, too many conflicting stories in recent weeks. But Susan's desperation, her raw anguish, eventually wore him down. "All right, Susan, calm down. I'll come home. Tell me what she said. What proof?" Susan hung up, her shoulders slumping. "Oh, Arthur, what have we done? My poor boy. We thought he was a philanderer. We accused him, and it was all a lie. I want him back. I just want him home." Arthur placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Dave is a good man, Susan. A quiet man. He's always been honest. It never quite sat right with me. Him cheating. It wasn't his nature." His brow furrowed in thought. "And Sharon, she's always had a way of getting what she wants. Remember how Frank was always so quick to side with her, to fan the flames when she complained about Dave?" Susan looked up, a new troubling thought emerging. "Frank? You think Frank knew? Or helped her?" The question hung in the air, dark and unsettling. The idea that their own son might have conspired, however subtly, against his brother was a bitter pill. Miles away, alone in her quiet, perfect home, Sharon felt a chill settle deep in her bones. Emily Olson wasn't just exposing a lie. She was systematically dismantling Sharon's entire life, piece by calculated piece. The Mrs. Carlson comment echoed in her mind. Emily had always been smarter than Sharon gave her credit for. And now, Sharon began to truly fear what Emily was capable of and the total exposure that awaited her. St. Christopher's Crossing was exactly as Emily remembered it from her research. A quaint university town, all red brick and ivy, nestled beside the languid curve of the river. The air, even in late summer, held a hint of autumn's crispness. She pulled her car into the parking spot of her new apartment complex, a modest, well-maintained building just a few blocks from campus. Unpacking boxes filled with books and familiar mementos, she felt a quiet hum of anticipation, a nervous energy beneath her practiced calm. This was more than just a new job. It was the next phase of her carefully laid plan. Her first week at the linguistics department was a whirlwind of orientations and new faces. Emily, with her easy smile and sharp intellect, quickly established herself. She integrated seamlessly, always listening, always observing. In casual conversations with colleagues over lukewarm coffee, she began to drop carefully phrased inquiries. "You know, I remember a Dave Carlson from around here. Engineering, I think. Any chance he's still in the area?" The answers came piecemeal but clear. "Yes, a Dave Carlson. Professor Carlson teaches some pretty specialized engineering courses. Quiet fellow, brilliant mind. Keeps to himself mostly." The pieces clicked into place. He was here just as Arthur had hinted. Emily began to adjust her routine. She mapped out the campus, noting the engineering building, the main library, the various faculty lounges. She needed to casually encounter him. Not an ambush, not a confrontation, but a gentle re-entry into his life. He wouldn't be rushed. He wouldn't be overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Dave Carlson lived his days with a quiet, almost monastic discipline. His apartment, sparse and orderly, reflected his internal state. Work filled his hours. The intricate problems of fluid dynamics and structural integrity offered a refuge from the messy, emotional chaos that had become his personal life. He poured himself into his teaching, his research, finding solace in the absolute logic of mathematics and physics. The false accusations from Sharon still gnawed at him, a constant, dull ache beneath the surface of his composure. He carried the heavy weight of betrayal, believing that his family, even his own children, had turned their backs on him. They all believed her, he thought, staring at a blank wall in his office. They think I'm a cheat, a liar, a worthless man. The thought of his children, the casual way they might now dismiss him, was a sharp personal torment. He remembered the look in Sharon's eyes, the cold, calculated way she had delivered her pronouncements. He remembered the arguments, the accusations, the way she had twisted every innocent interaction into proof of his infidelity. She always knew how to make people believe her, he thought, a familiar bitterness rising. He hadn't fought back much, not really. What was the point? When everyone you loved had already made up their mind, when the weight of the law had become too heavy to lift. He had retreated, cut off contact with his parents, even his brother. It was easier this way, he reasoned, less complicated, less painful for everyone. Then, one Tuesday, as Emily walked across the bustling campus common, heading towards the university library, she saw him. He was walking slowly, head down, a stack of papers tucked under his arm. The afternoon sun caught the silver in his dark hair. He was leaner than she remembered, the lines around his eyes a little deeper, etched with a quiet weariness. But it was him. Her heart gave a little lurch, a surprising physical reaction to a man she had been chasing, indirectly, for years. He was still strong, she noted, the same solid build she remembered. But there was a guardedness in his posture, a subtle withdrawal that hadn't been there before. The urge to call out his name, to rush forward and bridge the gap of years and lies, was almost overwhelming. She clenched her hands, resisting. No, not like this. He needed space. He needed time. Emily began to frequent the university coffee shop, the one closest to the engineering building, around the times Dave usually finished his morning classes. She started spending her lunch breaks in the library, in the section adjacent to where she'd seen him browse engineering journals. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in her routine, designed to create a natural, unforced encounter. A week later, she was sitting at a small table in the coffee shop, reviewing lecture notes, when he walked in. He ordered a black coffee, his voice a low murmur she barely caught. He turned, scanning the tables, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes met hers. It was brief, a fraction of a second. She offered a small, polite smile, the kind she'd give any stranger. His expression remained neutral, unrecognizing. He simply nodded curtly and found an empty table in the corner. Emily watched him for a moment longer, then returned to her notes. The lack of recognition didn't sting. It solidified her resolve. He wasn't ready, but she was here now, and she wasn't going anywhere, Schwassel. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet conviction. This was the right path. The university library, with its hushed reverence for knowledge, became Emily's preferred stage. She found the section where Dave often perused engineering journals. One cool afternoon, as he reached for a weighty tome on structural mechanics, Emily, with a book already in hand, stepped slightly forward. Their shoulders brushed, a light, almost imperceptible contact. "Oh, excuse me," Dave murmured, pulling back with an automatic politeness. His eyes, usually cast downwards, flickered up, catching hers for a fleeting moment before retreating to the spine of the book he was holding. The apology was distant, practiced, devoid of any real connection. "No, my fault entirely," Emily replied, her voice soft and professional. She offered a small, disarming smile. "I'm Emily Olson, new in the linguistics department, just getting acquainted with the layout." She extended a hand, her grip firm and brief. Dave hesitated, then shook her hand. "Dave Carlson," he offered, his tone flat. His guard was a visible thing, a subtle barrier around him. Yet in the brief second their eyes had met, Emily detected something, a flicker of uncertainty, a ghost of familiarity that he hadn't quite placed. Carlson, Emily repeated as if tasting the name. Yes, I heard you teach in engineering. I was just looking at an article on the use of advanced algorithms in urban planning. It reminded me of some fascinating work on language mapping and its structural dependencies, almost like an unseen framework governing communication flow. Quite similar in concept, wouldn't you say, to how urban planners account for population movement and logistical pathways? She kept her tone academic, a neutral ground, but the topic was a niche one, something that might pique his intellectual curiosity. Dave paused, his brow furrowed in thought. His gaze, for the first time, held hers for more than a fleeting moment. Her words, connecting seemingly disparate fields with an elegant analogy, intrigued him. It was a kind of insight, a precise way of thinking he hadn't encountered in years. The conversation was purely intellectual, devoid of personal demands, and for a moment the heavy weight he carried seemed to lighten. They spoke for a few minutes, discussing the abstract intersections of their fields, the underlying patterns that governed both language and physical structures. Emily was careful, offering just enough to engage him, but never venturing into anything that might hint at their shared past. Dave found himself surprisingly drawn to the exchange, a quiet warmth unfurling within him that felt utterly foreign. It was a fleeting connection, purely academic, yet it left a mark. He returned to his office, the lingering echo of her words, her precise intellect, unsettling his usual composure. Who was she? Why did her face feel so almost familiar? He shook his head, dismissing the thought. He had to be careful. He couldn't afford any more complications. Emily, however, felt a surge of quiet triumph. The seed was planted. The conversation, brief as it was, had been successful. He was intrigued. Her next move would be subtle but deliberate. She composed an email that evening, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Subject, following up on our library discussion. Dear Professor Carlson, it was a pleasure speaking with you today in the library. Your insights on urban planning algorithms sparked a few more thoughts regarding language mapping. I've attached a recent paper by Dr. Eleanor Vance that touches on some of the points we discussed. You might find it interesting. Best regards, Emily Olson, Assistant Professor, Linguistics Department. She sent it, then waited. A day later, a reply landed in her inbox. It was brief, polite, and professional. Dear Professor Olson, thank you for the paper. I appreciate you sending it along. I will take a look when time permits. Sincerely, Dave Carlson, Professor, Engineering Department. The door was ajar, just a crack, but it was open. Emily felt a growing conviction. He needed to hear the truth, not just about Sharon's lies, but about everything. But she wrestled with the timing. How to tell him without re-traumatizing him? How to offer him solace without reopening old wounds too abruptly? She had to proceed with extreme caution. Meanwhile, back in Sharon's perfectly manicured home, the silence often felt thick and heavy. The children, Emily and David Jr., moved through their days with a quiet detachment. David Jr. spent hours locked in his room, headphones on, gaming. Emily, named after the woman her father had once loved, now found herself observing her mother with a careful, almost wary gaze. Their father's absence was a chasm in the house, a wound that Sharon tried to plaster over with superficial cheer and expensive gifts. But it remained deep and unhealed. They rarely spoke of him, but his ghost lingered in every untouched chair, every quiet meal. Sometimes life's most costly choices unfold in unexpected ways, changing not only our own paths, but those of everyone around us. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The invitation from Emily Olson arrived in Dave Carlson's inbox with a crisp, professional tone. It proposed a coffee meeting to discuss potential interdisciplinary projects between engineering and linguistics, referencing their brief, intriguing conversation in the library. Dave hesitated, but the academic angle appealed to his structured mind. It wasn't personal, merely professional. He agreed. They met at the campus coffee shop, the same one where he'd seen her before. The scent of roasted beans filled the air, a neutral backdrop to the conversation Emily was carefully orchestrating. After a few minutes of discussing theoretical cross-applications, Emily shifted gears, her voice still light. It's funny, she began, stirring her latte. Sometimes I run into people here from back home. From our hometown, I mean. It's a small world, isn't it? I remember a few faces from high school, though of course, that was years ago. Do you ever run into anyone? She mentioned a few names, a former teacher, a kid who worked at the grocery store, casual, almost innocent questions designed to probe without pressing. Dave's guard remained up, a visible wall. Not really, he said, his voice flat. I don't keep in touch much. My past, it's a closed chapter. He took a sip of his black coffee, his eyes scanning the bustling room, avoiding hers. The pain of the last few years had carved itself deep, turning his memories into a landscape of broken promises. Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. She knew this resistance. She had anticipated it. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out her phone. I was actually going through some old photos the other day, she said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more personal. Cleaning out digital clutter. You know how it is. And I found this. She turned the screen towards him. It was a picture from high school, slightly faded, capturing a moment of youthful exuberance. A group of friends, laughing. In the center, a shy, handsome Dave, barely out of his teens, his arm casually around a girl with long, dark hair, eyes bright with an easy smile. Gemma, as she was known then. Emily. Dave froze, his hand, lifting his coffee cup, stopped halfway, his eyes fixed on the screen widened, shock rippling across his features. The smile on the girl's face, the familiar curve of her awe, the way her hair fell. A wave of recognition, profound and jarring, washed over him, swiftly followed by a cascade of confusion. The pleasant intellectual professor sitting opposite him, the girl from his distant past. How could he not have seen it? Gemma, he whispered, the name a raw, fragile sound from a forgotten time. His voice was thick with emotion, disbelief, and a dawning understanding. He looked up at Emily, his eyes now wide, searching. Emily offered a gentle, sympathetic smile. It's Emily now, she corrected softly. But yes, it's me. I understand why you wouldn't have recognized me. It's been a long time, and a lot has happened. She saw the questions forming in his eyes, the rapid recalculations of his past and present colliding. Dave, she continued, her voice firming slightly, I came here because I heard what Sharon was saying, that you cheated on her 2 years ago. She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. It's not true, she lied. 2 years ago, I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, studying linguistics. There was no affair, no cheating. She pulled up the digital proof again, passport stamps, university records, a handful of photos of her in front of Scottish landmarks. Clear, undeniable evidence. Dave stared at the screen, then back at Emily, his face a mask of disbelief. The world he had painstakingly constructed around Sharon's narrative, the one that justified his isolation, began to splinter. She said, she said she found texts, emails, said you two had been seeing each other for months, said everyone knew. His voice cracked, the memory of Sharon's cold accusations still sharp. My kids, Emily and David Jr., they hated me. My parents, they barely spoke to me. They believed her. He looked away, pain etched deep into his features. I just left. It was easier to disappear than to keep fighting. Your parents know the truth now, Dave, Emily said gently, reaching across the table to place her hand briefly over his. It was a gesture of comfort, not intimacy. I went to Arthur. He and Susan have seen the evidence. They're devastated by what Sharon did. They want to talk to you. They want you home. He pulled his hand back slowly, not out of rejection, but from the sheer weight of the information. My parents, they believe me? His voice was faint, tinged with a fragile hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. But the wounds were still raw, the betrayal still a gaping chasm. I don't know, Emily. It's too much. I don't know if I can face them or anyone. Think about your children, Dave, Emily urged, her voice soft but insistent. They suffered too. They've been without their father because of a lie. They need you. They need to know the truth. He looked at her then, truly looked at her. The new Emily, the old Gemma. His eyes, though still clouded with pain, held a flicker of something new, something fragile. Hope. I, I'll think about it, he said, his voice barely audible. About calling them. It wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning. The phone in Dave's hand felt impossibly heavy. He stared at the number, his thumb hovering over the call button for what felt like an eternity. Emily sat across from him in his sparse living room, offering a silent, reassuring presence. Finally, with a deep, shaky breath, he pressed call. Arthur Peterson's voice, when it answered, was filled with a cautious hope. "Dave, is that really you, son?" "Grandpa," Dave managed, his own voice breaking. The floodgates opened. Years of unspoken pain, misunderstanding, and forced distance poured out in a rush of fractured sentences. Arthur listened, his own voice thick with emotion, occasionally interjecting with words of comfort and reassurance. After a few minutes, Arthur passed the phone. "Dave, oh my boy, I'm so sorry. So sorry." Susan Carlson's voice was a ragged whisper of tears and profound regret. "We were wrong, son. We believed her. We should never have doubted you. Please forgive us." The apology was raw, heartfelt, stripping away years of Dave's internalized shame. He heard the genuine sorrow in her voice, the desperate need for his forgiveness. He found himself offering it, a simple, "It's okay, Mom," that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken conversations. He learned then the full extent of their distress, their frantic attempts to understand Sharon's narrative, and their ultimate, unwavering belief in his innocence, thanks to Emily. Emily observed Dave from across the room. She watched his shoulders visibly relax, the tension that had been a constant companion in his posture slowly begin to ease. The call was a turning point, a fragile bridge built over a chasm of lies. She had done what she set out to do, at least this part. A few days later, Dave made the decision. "I need to see them," he told Emily, his eyes still weary, but now holding a flicker of resolve. "My parents, I need to see them, talk to them face to face." He paused, then looked at her. Would you come with me? For support?" Emily simply nodded. "Of course, Dave. I'll drive." The drive to his parents' home was quieter than the phone call, filled with an unspoken mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Robert Carlson was waiting on the porch, his own face etched with worry, but now also immense relief. He enveloped Dave in a crushing hug, his voice hoarse. "My boy, I'm so sorry, Dave. I was a fool, a damn fool to ever doubt you." That evening, the family gathered around the dining room table, a scene that had felt impossible just weeks before. With Emily's quiet presence and Arthur's steady gaze, they spoke openly about Sharon. The deliberate manipulation, the calculated isolation, the way she had woven a web of deceit so convincing that it had trapped them all. Dave listened, his own memories of Sharon's subtle cruelties aligning with his family's growing understanding. Back at Sharon's home, the children, Emily and David Jr., felt the shift, a subtle but undeniable change in the atmosphere. Their grandparents had started visiting more often, bringing with them old photo albums, stories of their father that didn't align with their mother's narrative. Pictures of Dave laughing, coaching David Jr.'s Little League team, fixing Emily's bike. Stories of a gentle, patient man, not the heartless cheater Sharon had painted. "Grandma, Dad wasn't always like, bad, was he?" David Jr. asked one afternoon, looking at a photo of Dave teaching him to fish. Susan's eyes softened. "No, sweetie, your dad was never bad. He loves you more than anything." Armed with these small fragments of truth, the children began to question Sharon. "Mom, Grandma said Dad coached my team. Why did you say he was never around?" Emily asked, her young face serious. Sharon, feeling the foundations of her carefully constructed world begin to crack, doubled down. "They don't understand, honey. Your father chose his selfish ways over us. He broke our family. They're just trying to make excuses for him." She tried to paint herself as the ultimate victim, the strong woman who had sacrificed everything. But the children, no longer completely blind, simply watched her, their eyes now holding a nascent doubt. The seeds of truth, planted by Emily and nurtured by their grandparents, were taking root. A few days later, a formal legal letter arrived at Sharon's address. It was from Dave through a lawyer. It demanded a meeting to discuss the children, their custody, and their future. Sharon read the words, her hands trembling. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Her control was slipping. It was truly slipping away. Whispers began in the community. Over coffee, at the local diner, at the grocery store, fragments of the story started to circulate. Did you hear about Dave Carlson? Apparently, Sharon wasn't quite honest. That Emily Olson, she's back in town. The truth, like water finding cracks in a dam, was beginning to seep through. The meeting was arranged in a neutral office, a stark, functional room meant to facilitate difficult conversations. Dave walked in, Emily by his side, her presence a quiet anchor. Sharon Miller sat opposite them, her face composed, a forced serenity in her eyes. David Jr. and Emily, their face carefully blank, sat beside her. Sharon started, her voice a practiced blend of sadness and accusation. Dave, I don't know why you're doing this. You're just confusing the children. They've been through enough. She glanced at her children, seeking their validation. But the children, now armed with doubts, did not respond as she expected. They watched Dave, their expressions betraying a mixture of fear and dawning curiosity. Dave, his voice steady, held up a printout. Sharon, we're not confusing them. We're telling them the truth. He placed copies of the evidence on the table. Emily's passport stamps, the university records from Edinburgh, the dates clearly showing she was overseas when Sharon claimed Dave had been having an affair with her. He laid out the timeline, the irrefutable facts, dismantling Sharon's entire narrative, piece by careful piece. As Dave spoke, the children's faces changed. David Jr.'s eyes, usually guarded, widened in stunned comprehension. Emily's lower lip trembled. The realization that their mother had intentionally poisoned their minds against their father, that she had fabricated an elaborate lie to alienate them, was a devastating blow. The betrayal was not just Dave's, it was theirs too. Cornered, Sharon's composure fractured. "This is a setup," she shrieked, her voice rising, raw and uncontrolled. "You two, you're conspiring against me. Always have been. Dave, you were always weak, easily led. And you, Emily, you always wanted what was mine." Her accusations were wild, desperate, ringing hollow in the quiet room. Just then the door opened, and Frank Carlson strode in, uninvited but clearly feeling entitled to be there. He shot a smug look at Dave. "What's all this ruckus? Sounds like someone's just upset they got caught. Sharon's a good woman, Dave. You never deserved her." He clearly thought he was coming to Sharon's rescue, an opportunity to further discredit his brother and perhaps gain favor. His crude attempt to mock Dave, to side with Sharon, was poorly timed. Susan and Robert Carlson, who had been waiting outside for their turn to speak with the children, now entered the room, drawn by Sharon's raised voice. Robert's face was thunderous. "Frank," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "that's enough. You keep quiet. You've done enough damage with your silence and your lies." Susan stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Frank, disappointment etched on her face. "Frank, your brother has been through hell, and you stood by and let it happen. Never once did you ask if there was another side. Never once did you support him. Shame on you." Frank, taken aback by their unified condemnation, visibly flinched, his smugness evaporating. He was alienated, not just from Dave, but from his own parents as well. The legal proceedings for Dave to regain custody or establish significant visitation rights began in earnest. With the overwhelming evidence provided by Emily, Sharon's legal team found themselves on the defensive, unable to credibly counter the facts. The narrative of Dave's infidelity, once so widely accepted, was crumbling. In town, the whispers turned into open conversations. The full truth of Sharon's deception spread through the small community like wildfire. Friends she had cultivated for years began to distance themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Her standing in the community, once meticulously crafted, dissolved. She experienced, in brutal clarity, the pay-the-price aspect of her actions. Her social life, her carefully constructed image, lay in ruins. Throughout the legal battle, Dave's parents supported him fiercely, both emotionally and financially. They were a solid, unwavering front against Sharon's fading resistance. And through it all, Emily was there. Her quiet strength, her unwavering belief, and her calm presence were a constant source of comfort and resolve for Dave. Their shared journey, born out of deceit and tempered by adversity, cemented a bond that felt both familiar and deeply new. The children, though still reeling from the shock, slowly began to reconnect with Dave. Their initial resistance gave way to tentative curiosity, then to genuine affection. Phone calls turned into supervised visits, then longer stays. The years of deception had left scars, but the healing had begun. The judge's gavel struck, a clean, sharp sound that echoed in the courtroom, officially granting Dave Carlson significant parental rights. Sharon's intricate web of lies, once a suffocating shroud, was now shredded by legal decree. She was left alone, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her, the cold realism of her actions settling heavily upon her. There was no public outcry, just a quiet, pervasive withdrawal from the community that had once supported her. Dave focused on his children, David Jr. and Emily, though still carrying the weight of past deception, cautiously opened themselves to his steady presence. They apologized, their young voices laced with sincere regret for their initial harshness, admitting how much they had longed for him. Dave offered them not just forgiveness, but stability and an honesty he refused to compromise. Frank Carlson, his casual opportunism now fully revealed to his family, found himself marginalized. His calls went unanswered, his presence uninvited. The Carlson family, though scarred, began a slow, deliberate process of healing. Arthur Peterson, watching from the quiet wisdom of his years, expressed a profound pride in Dave and Emily, seeing in their resilience the enduring strength of truth itself. Dave and Emily, their relationship forged in the crucible of Sharon's deceit, found a quiet, enduring love. It wasn't born of grand gestures, but of shared purpose, mutual respect, and a deep understanding that had weathered years of separation and misunderstanding. They spoke of a future, perhaps staying in St. Christopher's Crossing, or finding a new landscape where their life could unfold. Dave walked with a newfound sense of redemption, no longer defined by Sharon's false narrative. Emily, having cleared his name and found him, found her own peace and purpose, a quiet satisfaction in bringing light to the darkness. Life settled into a new rhythm, not without its past echoes, but filled with the steady promise of genuine connection. Looking out over the quiet Midwestern landscape, Dave and Emily stood side by side, a testament to love found and justice, however quietly, finally served.